Hello, everybody, wherever you're watching this, whenever you're watching it in the world. This is Cross's Corner. We're back after a summer break. I'm Martin Cross, and with me is the one and only Camilla Hadland Horrocks. Camilla, lovely to see you again.
Lovely to be back, Crossy. It's awesome to be chatting about the world champs with you.
Well, it is, and it's happening quite soon, just next week, and there are going to be some fantastic races. It's going to be a bit hard to do these predictions, I know. But as you were saying, we've got a little bit more information than we had when we tried to do the Olympic predictions for Tokyo.
Yeah,
In
we were getting a little bit wildly, into the wind there, weren't we, with Tokyo with a few of our predictions, but a little bit more data and structure to this one now.
Yes, so let's jump straight into it. Let's go through event by event, starting with the small ones and going up to the bigger boats. So let's start with men's singles. You said you were really looking forward to this. I would echo that. Why and what do you think?
I just think there's been so much kind of change in this event, right? Even since the Olympic final in Tokyo, where there were lots of upsets, people not making the A final, like the likes of Ollie Zeidler, and just a big amount of chopping and changing, as there always is with small boats, and the emergence of kind of new heroes, right? Like the great Melvin Twaylar, who just seems to have been on a storm this season. The continuing resurgence of the likes of Discos, the Greek, and then some newcomers still in the mix. Graham Thomas's from Great Britain, Bastian Secker of Denmark. There's so much to talk about, I think, with this event.
Yeah, and I just wonder, I'm wondering what Ollie Zeidler's going to do because of that race in Munich where he blew out in the last sort of few strokes of the race. I just fondly imagine him coming through the field like he did in Linz in 2019. I thought he'd have that sprint in his back pocket, but he didn't. And I wonder what that's done to him psychologically in terms of his preparation for these worlds.
Yeah, and he was so close to it, right? Like I think he was within, 150 meters of pacing it perfectly. He just looked like he was about to do it. He was going at the right time and just ran out of steam. And I think that little bit of timing, we know he can win a world championships. We know that he's got it in him, especially against even an experienced field. But the guys around him are real racers, right? They'll race him into the ground, and
Yeah.
that sort of pressure. Yeah,
Where
and the conditions as well with Richizia. Who knows what that's going to look like next week?
Yeah, I think the finals have got lightish winds, although I think earlier in the week's moderate winds, but that shouldn't be too much problem for the favourites. Have you got Ollie Zeidler? Are you going to predict him winning a medal?
It's so difficult to say, because I think I would firmly put my, money on medals with the Greek sculler, with Duskos, and with Melvin Twaylar. I just think he's looked absolutely sensational if he can continue that form. And then there's only really one more medal up for grabs, right? And whether Zeidler can continue that, I don't know. We've also got like Jack Cleary in the single for Australia, and given his performance in the double, he jumped into that at Lucerne and came away with a silver medal. We know he's a really strong sculler. There's again, all of the A final of the European Championships was just chopping and changing the whole time. I just don't know whether Zeidler's going to feel affected by that performance on home water. He's not an absolute firm favourite for me in the medals.
No, that's interesting. I mean, you've got, talking about Chetelborsch, you mentioned him earlier, made the small final at the Europeans, but you think with a bit more training after his injury that he had earlier in the season, that he'll be at a higher level and at least, pushing for the A final. You always wonder about the likes of Griskonis, the Lithuanian, who, has got form in the single. He's getting on now, but you don't know which kind of Griskonis is going to turn up at the start. And then the USA's Ben Davison, who did he come third in Poznan, I think?
I think you're right. I think he was on the podium, which again, the only chance we've seen the USA really all season, right? And to put in a medal-winning performance, you've kind of got to take that for what it is.
So I'm going to predict my 1, 2, 3. I'm going to predict Tuskos because I kind of think he nearly got through Tweller at the end. I think he wouldn't have been flat out prep for the Europeans. I think he might have something still to come. I'm going to go Tuskos, Tweller, and Zeidler. I think for my 3.
I think that's a really good prediction. I think I'm going to stick with you for the top 2 actually, and my bronze medal. Do you know what the other candidate that we've completely not talked about is Trevor Jones of Canada, right? Like the up and coming under 23 with another year training under his belt. Do you know what? I'm going to pick Jack Cleary, the Australian. I just think he made that double go so much quicker in Lucerne. I think he's a great sculler. I think we see good things from both of the Aussie scullers, and I know we'll come on to the women's single in a minute, where again I think Tara Rigney is going to make a real impact.
Okay, well, let's talk about the women's single. We've done our men's single now. I'm really excited about this. Really excited to see Florine v Twig, basically.
Yeah, and I just don't know what form Twig's in at all, right? Difficult to know how much training she's done, what kind of form she's in. She was just completely and utterly untouchable on the run up to Tokyo, and I think we forget that it took her a really long time to get there, right? Like she wasn't on the podium in the women's single for almost her entire career at the World Champs, and so it was a really special thing to have that set of performances all the way through. But I just don't know, because it took her such a long time to get there. Can she now pick that back up where she left off, or is it going to take another bit of time to get back onto that form?
Yeah, well, I guess like before the Olympics in 2021, the New Zealanders had a long time without competition. It was a shame about the COVID and Henley and Lucerne that she couldn't. She was going to race the double, wasn't she? I think. So I just think the name Emma Twigg, an Olympic champion, because Florine has just carried everybody before her this season. She's been a sensation coming into the event, and I think it's going to take a lot to beat her because she's actually won races by clear water, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the European Championships, the most recent performance we've had from her, she was lengths ahead of the field. She really was. And I know that's we're talking about Europe-centric competition, but I think that's the case really with the women's single. A couple of outside individuals. You've got to remember that the Chinese sculler Lu Shiyu will have a decent kind of run, I suspect. And same for Twig, we've mentioned, and Tara Rigney of Australia. I did say I was going to come back to her. Ended up in the singlet Lucerne almost by accident, picking up a medal, having supposed to have been sculling in the double, I think, and then found herself through that whole COVID spell that the Aussie team had during World Cup 3, racing the single and doing really well. And it looks like they've kept her there for that reason. So, a few others to come into that mix from Munich.
Yeah. And what about Foster, the German, who won at Lucerne? And she got a bronze in the Euros, didn't she? Only 20 years of age. I don't think she's gonna medal, and because my pick for the bronze medal is Cara Cola, who was in the season earlier in the double, but she's again stepped into the single sculls. I think she's probably going to do enough to get into that medal place. We haven't talked about Janine Gemelin either. I mean, I can't see Janine Gemelin getting past the top 3 that I'm going to pick. But she's going to be in the A final almost certainly.
Yeah, I agree. I think Gemelin's been, I guess historically strong. Her strongest year was a post-Olympic year, right, when she won the Worlds back in 2017. But I can't see her getting into the medals on the form that she's been in recently. Past first, I just don't think has the race maturity yet, right? Like
Yeah,
she
yeah,
almost blew her semi-final at the European Championships. She almost didn't even make the A final, and you just can't afford to have that kind of racing strategy at the Worlds where you're doing back to back to back races every single day. You can't be, chancing your arm and leaving your chances that late. So I'm going to write her off. But yeah, I agree with you. I think for me, the podium certainly is going to include Caroline Florijn of the Netherlands. It's certainly going to include Emma Twigg. And then I think I'm going to go for Tara Rigney. So my two Aussie picks in the men's and women's singles for the bronze medals.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
Rigney could be a real dark horse here.
And what about who you picking to win?
I, I think Florijn. I think just given the sort of break that Twig will have had post Tokyo, that sort of come down, the ability to have a break, take that time out. Whereas Florijn, has come out of the four. She's really hungry. She's obviously hitting the single really hard. On the way up, I just think that this is her time to shine and her time to prove herself in the single.
Yeah, well, I'm with you there on the top two. I've got Netherlands and New Zealand, and then I've gone for Caracola. But I think Rigney's a great pick. Men's pairs. This is going to be another absolute delight to watch this competition.
It really is, and the battle has just changed throughout the season. Waves and waves of people, getting one over on each other. We go all the way back to Henley Royal Regatta, right? And the Kiwis getting one over on the British. Then the British got one over on the Kiwis. Then it was the Aussies. Came into the mix for World Cup 3 alongside both of them, and it was the British that triumphed. It's a real, and then the Romanians came into the mix at the Europeans and beat the British. So there's kind of four crews here, I think, with real pedigree to be able to take this event with two hands and become the standout crew. But it's just been chopping and changing throughout the season.
Yeah, honourable mentions for the Spanish, Canajalo Pazos and Garcia Ordonez, and the USA, who I think had a good showing, Justin Best and Mike Grady, but I don't think they're going to get onto the podium places. It's fascinating because I think that Romania may have peaked for the Europeans. There was a lot of talk about that, wasn't there? The Romanian team being on the top to top for the Europeans, maybe due to funding issues. I think this pair of Alex Hill, I think Alex Hill is such a star, the stroke of the Australian four. I was surprised to see him not back in the Australian four, actually, but he's in the pair with Harley Moore. So I think, with a lot of time training, untroubled training, because they kind of had just got into the pair for Lucerne, I think they're going to be fast. I think the New Zealanders are going to be going toe to toe with them. The Australians could win it, the New Zealanders could win it, the British could win it. Not sure about the Romanians.
Do you know what though, Crossy? I must say, and having just been kind of singing Australia's praises through the singles events, I'm actually going to disagree with you about the Hill Moore combination, because I know they'd only just got into it, but the way that they were rowing a pair at Lucerne, like unless something has dramatically been fixed between Lucerne and now, it was just unsustainable. Like the rating, though, Alex Hill was in that pair taking it down at like 45 strokes a minute, well into the first half of the course, and they just blew up. The whole field came around them, and it to row a pair well, and I'm sure you know this, Martin, right? Like no matter what you do, it's only going to go fast if you do it together. Even if you choose to rate 45, you've both got to do it together. You both got to commit, and that pair just was like doing all sorts of stuff not together, not in synchronicity, not it was very chasey. It was quite like bouncy. I just didn't see it as being a combination that could go
Yeah.
fast unless it was just pushing the rate really, really high. And that's just going to burn them out, right? So I just think thinking of that efficiency and technique over that high rating, chasey style is always going to benefit the likes of the Kiwis, the British, even the Serbians to some extent, right? I think they rode really well. Makovic and Vasic have rode a beautiful pair, right?
Yeah.
And they can sprint really well at the end, but they've rode really well together this season.
Okay, so I'm now starting to think about why I predicted Australia to win this event. Maybe I was just being contrary because I think you put out a really good argument there. I just had a bit of faith in their coach Lyle McCarthy. So I'm going now. I'm thinking this is probably wrong that I've got here. I'm going Australia, New Zealand, Britain for the 1, 2, 3. What have you got?
I think I'm going to go really rogue here. I put my faith in Great Britain to come back, to bounce back. I then think I'm going to go for New Zealand and Serbia.
Ooh, that is a really big call, putting Makovic and Vasic in there ahead of the Romanians. That's quite a brave call, Camilla.
It is, and I feel for the Serbians because I think that they really did deserve that. I say deserve. I think on form they were down on paper for that bronze medal at Tokyo last year, and they got beaten out by the Danish crew, right?
Yeah.
And they're such a superstar boat for the Serbians. They've been rowing really well. I think my question actually comes not only from Romania but also from the Spanish. I think that the Spanish pair have, really surprised us in that last 500 meters, taken some scalps, gained some places. So, I say Serbia, but I think that challenge for the bronze medal could come from those three crews: Romania, Serbia, and Spain.
Okay, let's move on to women's pairs, which is going to be another great event in Lucerne. It was this amazingly tight finish between the New Zealand pair of Prendergast and Williams and the Romanians of Rincineo and Tivolescu. Is anyone else going to get in on that act?
I don't think so. I think that those two are the outstanding pairs in this field. The British have obviously been up there on the podium at every World Cup this season, so they've been really consistent. Esme Booth and Emily Ford, and I suspect that they will be on the podium again. But I just think that the Kiwis are just too strong and too experienced to let anyone come past them.
Yeah, I guess they had been training in England, hadn't they? And they hadn't been together for a while because Grace Prendergast was doing her Cambridge thing. So they're going to have had more time in the pair with their coach, Mike Rogers. So I think you're right, and I'm going to go for New Zealand, Romania, and Britain on that call. The only thing that I would say is that I really love the way that the Dutch pair row, the pair from the Netherlands, Cleveling and Meester, and I feel a bit anxious that I haven't put them in for a medal because I think they rode so beautifully to win the silver in the 4 in Tokyo.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the only thing I would put in there, I think they're doubling up, aren't they, Crossy, into the 8?
Yes.
At the World Champs, and they were close to the British in the semi-final at the European Champs in Munich, but it was still the British that were successful in staying ahead in that semi-final, and same for the final, right?
Yeah.
So they would have to have a pretty dramatic improvement of performance in that span of a few weeks to get onto the podium ahead of the likes of GB. I think I have to agree with you, Crossy, on your exact medal order. I think I'm going to say exactly the same thing. I'm tempted to switch around GB and Romania, mostly because, like you said, the Romanians peaked for Munich. It was very, very close. But yeah, I think I'm going to stick with you there.
Okay. Let's move on to the men's double sculls. Is there any point talking about anyone else for the gold medal outside of the Croatians?
I don't think so. Although you have probably noticed that the Olympic champions are back in the double together, and I know they're one of your favourite crews
Yes,
of
they
the
are.
last few years, Martin. So I'd be surprised if you weren't sort of championing them to come back with a bang. But again, they've had a pretty up and down season in the single sculls, Hugo and Mathieu. So I just don't know whether this double combination has been back training quite as well as it would have done last year.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I don't quite well. I know that Hugo Boucheron had, some psychological issues after Tokyo. It was a hard landing for him, and he's great that he's worked through those. And maybe that's why they were in the singles. Boucheron had to rediscover his joy of rowing again. And perhaps Alexis Besançon, as the coach, has said, you're better off in singles. But I think whatever, they're not going to be at their top-to-top form, at which they need to be to beat the Croatians. Having said that, who was it? Was it the Spanish who got close to the Croatians in the Europeans?
Yeah, I think it was. That Spanish pairing are a bit like their men's pair, right? Really feisty, always fighting up there in the sprinting stages at the beginning and at the end. But their middle pace, perhaps, that third 500 is where the Croatians, sort of cut the cord and moved away. But yeah, they could be a really good, surprising crew, I guess, at this World Championships.
Mentions for doubles like the Australians as well. Maybe I almost said the USA there, but I kind of stopped myself. Yeah, I think the Australians double of Bartelt and Mantil. They've got a really good coach. Lyle McCarthy took Kim Brennan to the gold medal in Rio. Yeah, I think the Australians will be there or thereabouts.
No, I agree. They went really well in Lucerne. And actually, do you know what? I've just realised, I think I said it was Jack Cleary that was in it, but I've got them the wrong way round, right? So I think it was Jack Cleary that jumped into the double and has made it go. Sorry, Jack Cleary that's in the single.
Yeah.
And it was Antil maybe that jumped into the double, or
It
David
was.
Bartlett that jumped into the double.
It might have been David
Those
Bartlett.
three
Yeah.
scullers have switched around, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they've got three really strong scullers that they clearly think, this double is going very quickly. It's picked up a silver medal in Lucerne, which is, notoriously a hard place to do that. They could be really good contenders for the podium.
Chinese double, they're just a couple of youngsters. China's the reigning world champions. I'm not sure. They've got Tom Kay coaching them, but I can't see a 19 and an 18-year-old getting near the podium in this event. Anybody else we haven't talked about, you think?
I don't think so. I think, just taking a bit of a look down the entry list, the Greek sculling squad is really strong at the moment. So,
Yeah.
A shout out to Greece for just strength in depth, I think, generally within their small sculling boats. But I'm not sure this double will do well enough for us to be talking about from a podium point of view. Yeah, and again, Lithuania. Again, you've got Nemravicius and Kamelis in that double. That could be surprising, but I think for me, we've got to be really focused on Croatia and France. I think it's going to be Croatia, and then between the French And oh gosh, I don't know who have you got for your bronze medal, Crossy?
I have got for my bronze medal Australia.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout. I think I'm going to change my mind. I think I'm going to go Croatia, Australia, France.
Yeah. I think that would be sensible prediction. I think France will be really pleased if they get a medal out of this, I have to say, after the seasons they've had. So that might not be such a bad shout. What about women's doubles? I mean, this is the most ludicrously one-sided event in terms of winners.
I think if someone turned around to me and said, you have to bet your house on one crew, it would be a toss-up between the Romanian women's double and the Chinese women's quad. And I don't know which one, is a more surefire bet, but those would be the two that I would be choosing between. So these guys really mean business, and I think it would be the upset of the century if Radish and Bodnar won by anything less than, a couple of lengths.
Clearwater, yeah. I keep meaning I haven't had a chance to go and chat to him at the regattas, but to talk to Antonio Colomalici, who's overseeing the coaching of the Romanian team, and saying what's so special about these two women. I mean, they are extraordinarily well synced up in terms of how they row and how they move, but it is sensational what they've done.
And I just can't get over still how young like Simona Radis is, right? Like
Yeah.
I think she's a 99 birthday, so she's only, 23. And to think that they won the World Championships back in 2019, I think was the start of their kind of, or they were certainly on the podium to start that climb into their success string. She would have only been 20 years old, right? And to have that kind of form and that kind of record.
They were second to the New Zealanders, I think, in that one.
But yeah, I mean, how outstanding is that for someone of her age to have that kind of, reputation and record already?
So I think both of us are going to have Romania down as predictions for gold. What about doubles like the Netherlands, the USA, Wagner and Vitus, Italians, perhaps?
Italians, yeah, I was going to say the Italians are ones that I think, they always do well at a world championships. The amount of times that you hear the Italian national anthem blaring out over the speakers, they really come for this event and peak for it. And they picked up a silver medal at the Europeans in Munich, second overall in Europe to the Romanians. I think that maybe third. They got a bronze, didn't they? Because it was the Dutch that came second. My apologies.
Yes.
So yeah, can't forget Rose de Jong and Leila Yusufu, but they're up there, right? They're hanging on the coattails of the Dutch. I think we could see an all European podium in this one, Crossy. I think the result will probably run true from the podium we saw at Munich.
So that would be Romania, Netherlands, and Italy. Yeah, I had those down. There was a question mark I had, and that was about Sanita Paspura with her partner Zoe Hyde.
I agree. And it was such a shame that they didn't get to race the rest of Munich because of Anita catching COVID, right? It would have been good to see what performance they could put out because they did quite well in the heat, right?
Yeah, they did.
So, yeah, they could be surprising. And I think the same probably goes for the likes of, the Romanians again. We just can never write them off in women's events, I feel. So,
yeah,
a few strong contenders for a final, but I think the podium for me, looks to be a replication of Munich.
Okay, so let's move on to the lightweight categories and lightweight men's double sculls. Again, you say you bet your house on someone. I mean, somebody, if you're Irish, you might bet your house on Fintan McCarthy. I've got an apology to make because I've been calling him Fintan because I thought, but his name is Finton.
Yes.
And yeah, and I have to make abject apologies to Finton McCarthy. Not so much to Paul O'Donovan, but you could almost bet your house on those two, couldn't you?
I think this year especially, right? Like we went through a season last year where there was always that question mark about the Germans, Jason Osborne, sort of pushing that boat onwards. But I think this year the Italians have been crazily quick still, right? Oppo and Ruta that have managed to keep their seats in this lightweight double. They're still going ridiculously fast, but Ireland always come through. They always come through, even if they make you nervous in that first 1,000 meters, right? They still always manage to find that bit of magic to get them over the line in gold medal position. But yeah, I think those two crews, you definitely say are podium favourites. I'm a little bit, I'm a little bit sort of open to who else could form that trio on the podium, though. I've not really got a bronze medal pick in this one, Crossy.
No, I picked Switzerland only because I think Ahumada Ireland in the Swiss boat, or I think we can just call him Ireland. I think I heard that.
Yes.
That he's an outstanding talent, and put him with Jan Schubli. I think they were up there, weren't they, in the Europeans, and then they kind of faded a little bit to get a bronze medal. But I guess Norway didn't have a great Europeans, but they won. Did they win in Poznan or somewhere like that?
I'm unsure, but also I think again, shout out to Portugal, like the Duarte Costas. I think have been performing out of their skins this season. I think you can never take your eyes again off the likes of the Danish, like you say, Belgium, Van Zandweger and Colpart. Yeah, I think, and Rachel and Simonek, right? Like, there's so many names in this field. The French lightweight doubles back together. There's lots, but no standout for that bronze medal. I would say it kind of whoever's feeling good on the day, I think will nab it.
Right. So who are you going to say though? Because you have got to say someone. Ireland, Italy.
Who? Do you know what? I think Switzerland's a really good shout, Crossy. I think I'm going to go with you there.
Okay.
I think with a little bit of, finishing speed, they just need to hang on for that last 500 meters. Yeah, they'll be up there.
So let's move on to the lightweight women's doubles. A fascinating event in terms of the quality of, Olympic gold and silver medalists in the field, and this resurgent British double.
Yeah, I mean the British doubles performance at the European Championships, bringing Imogen Grant back into that crew after finishing her studies. They'd had Maddie Arlett sort of keeping that seat there while she was out completing her medical studies at Cambridge, but the dominance, I cannot see anyone getting close. The amount of improvement that would need to take place with the French, with the Italians, in order to even come close and plug that gap. I just don't see it being possible, right? And Britain are only going to get faster with even more training between Craig and Grant back in that combination together.
Yeah, I saw them doing on Instagram a crazy exercise, sitting at the front with square blades, just moving a few inches backwards and forwards, and thinking, crikey, I wouldn't like to do that.
The control, absolutely amazing, gobsmacking. And it was just so nice for them to be so relaxed at the front, right? Like usually the lightweight doubles events and any lightweight events, it always feels a little bit like edge of your seat. You feel like there's a lot of tension in it because it's usually bow ball for bow ball. But to see a crew dominating an event like that in the style that they did at those European Championships, it's so rare, right? It's just such a pleasure to watch that kind of performance. So yeah, for me, the British look like they're the ones to be beaten in this event.
Honourable shout out for the Greeks. They've got a 16-year-old kid in the boat, but they've got Evangelina Anastasiadou, who remarkably is a lightweight, and well, she's only 1 meter 65, which is 5 foot 5 inches tall, and she won a silver medal at the Europeans behind Caroline Florine. So
in the open category,
yeah, in the
right?
open category, and to see her on the medal podium, it was like almost to see a coxswain had just walked onto the medal podium. But she's obviously, I know Giovanni Postiglione, the Italian guy who's heads up the Greek operation. He thinks a lot about this 16-year-old Dimitra Kontu. Can't see them getting on the podium, but maybe in the final that'd be a great result for them. So, who's your gold, silver, bronze picks?
So a gold to Great Britain, I think.
Yeah, me too.
Now, the other thing we've not mentioned, I know we're talking about honourable mentions, but how awesome is it to see New Zealand back in the lightweight women's double? Jackie Kittle has found a new partner.
Yes.
Which we have to mention that, right? Like that's
yeah, we do. Rachel
going to
Kennedy.
be really interesting to see how they perform.
And yeah, she found her from the New Zealand rowing office at Cambridge, or Carapiro, apparently. So it will be interesting because obviously she is a reigning world champion, Jackie Kittle, with Zoe McBride when the championships were last held in 2019. So are you going to put the French ahead of the Italian Olympic champions, or the Olympic champions ahead of the French? Are they your gold, silver, bronze?
They are. They are. Do you know what, though? Ireland came so close to that bronze medal in Munich, so close, that they did make me think, with a bit more training and with that knowledge that they were that close, could they knock off one of the favourites from that trio that we're so sure are going to medal?
So who's going to get the silver and Ireland get the bronze?
I think for me, the French,
yeah,
the silver. And do you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to say Ireland for bronze.
Yeah, that's good. You're making some good bronze medal shout outs there. I like that.
Oh, I think you've got to take risks, Crossy. You've got to take risks. We
Yeah,
found this
definitely.
out last year when we did the Tokyo predictions, right?
You've
got to go bold sometimes.
Yeah, with Stefanos and Tuskos, nobody took a risk with him, did they? And look at how it turned out. So yes, men's four, big matchup this men's four competition. A lot of crews hoping they'll get on the podium in this. You'd say there were a couple of crews for the gold and silver, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the comments we've got coming in, Crossy. We're being told off for not giving the USA women's lightweight double any love.
Oh yes, sorry, no, that's a big shout out. That's a big shout out because they won in Poznan, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they had a great performance at Henley Royal as well. We can't forget that, despite, again, COVID sort of ups and downs. So, no, I think that's a really good shout, Brandon. Thank you for ensuring that we talked about Michelle and Mary.
I think that's a good shout out. I'm not sure they'll get on the podium with those Olympic crews, but they will definitely be there in the final. It's nice to have some audience reaction. Thank you ever so much for that. Men's four. Let's go back to the men's four.
Yeah, men's four. Now, we've managed to sort of, again, find ourselves in the age-old deja vu battle of GB versus Australia. I think you'd be hard-pressed to ignore that that's going to be one to watch. But I think, actually, coming back to the USA, some exciting new talent coming up from the US, and I'm excited to see what the new coaching structure, some of these crews that are coming through with a bit more sort of input, I guess, will produce. And so I think this USA 4 could be another one to throw into the mix.
Yeah, a couple of lads from California Rowing Club who've been coached by Mike Tatey. Mike doesn't like Europe, so he's not making the trip. This one's coached by Jesse Foglia. I'm not sure they're going to get on the podium. I think a final would be a great result for them. I think, I mean, we've got Britain and Australia out there, which on form you would say that's where the gold medal is going to be. One, Britain just rowing so well at this, program 36, tops 37 in the middle of the race. Really long, just a whole load of new guys that have just come through. Stewart, Nunn, and Aldrich, led by Freddie Davison, who sets that rhythm beautifully. And the Australians, who when they won in Poznan, they were just that they were being quite brutal with it, particularly through the middle of the stroke, and it did them well, and to an extent at Henley. But I don't think if that's the way they're going to row in the Czech Republic, I don't think they're going to win. But I would imagine their coach, they're coached by Rhett Aycliffe, who's heading up the Australian operation. I would imagine he's kind of smoothed them out. So they're going to be dangerous.
Yeah, I think they will be dangerous, but I just think that, like you say, the differences in style that we've seen in the big boats, especially, right, has been a real shift in a lot of countries towards this high rating, power down, get onto the next stroke, which I think the Australians, sort of really demonstrate in this four, right? And it's almost as far away on the spectrum from the way that the British row that you've got the most opposite of styles. But it goes to prove that under a new training program, under a new set of stewardship from Louise Kingsley, from the British Rowing Performance Director side, that model can still work, those lower ratings, that longer set of rowing. And I just think, it allows Great Britain to control the field in this event, like we've seen them do.
Yeah.
At the Europeans, where they got that right. It's their first 500. If GB get out in the first 500 and can control it, you can see what they produce. They didn't get that right at Lucerne, and they didn't get that right at Henley Royal, and so they ended up on the back foot and having to chase hard, which is where they're not quite as good. So as long as they've sorted that, I can't see Great Britain losing this one. I also think that we're going to have to watch out for the Romanians again, the Netherlands again. They're always names in this men's four that are around, right? That we're going to need to be conscious of.
Yeah, I think the Swiss are worth an honourable mention, and maybe the Chinese too. I think certainly to get into the final, that Swiss four with
Roman Roesley.
Roman Roesley. I was going to say Barnaby Delars, but he's now gone to sailing, hasn't he? Yeah, with Roman Roesley in, I think we'll get quicker since the Europeans. But what's our gold, silver? I've gone for Australia, Britain, and then Romania.
I think I'm going to go GB, Australian, Netherlands. I think.
Yeah, Netherlands was a good shout. They had a great Europeans, didn't they? And there's no reason why a crew with the Rinks brothers in, Ralph and Rick, shouldn't be up there.
Yeah, and I agree with your shout on Switzerland. I think that's this has been a real kind of secret weapon boat for them. They've put a lot of time into this project, and they were a final material at a very competitive European champs. I don't see them not being an a final material at the world champs as well.
Yeah. So, is it going to be a similar story in women's fours?
Now, I just can't get over the fact that the sort of Australia GB matchup hasn't happened yet in this boat. So
yeah,
they've managed to avoid each other all season, and again, this British crew at the European champs just sat back and relaxed for the middle 1,000 meters. They were up on the field, they were controlling everyone around them, and that's what we saw Australia do, in the previous season, right? So it's going to be hugely interesting to see how that dynamic of the race will change and develop if you've got two crews gunning out to get out in front and do that, how they're going to manage, coming up against each other, especially if it happens earlier than the A final, Crossy.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating. I mean, the British raced some of those Australian women in at Henley, didn't they? Where the 8 rode. Did the British 8 row through them at
Yeah, they
Henley?
did. You're absolutely right.
So I can't help thinking with the quality of the Australians, with Lucy Stephan there and the great Annabelle McIntyre. And they should have been in the pairs final, Annabelle McIntyre, Morrison and McIntyre, and challenging the New Zealanders, but for the sort of postponement. So I'm thinking that they're definitely out for a good shout. I think the Irish back in there that took bronze. Ireland traditionally just seem to get it right at World Championships. The USA come in with quite strong four. Looking at the names in that crew. Vicky Opitz in the stroke and then Erin Boxberger. The US could well do something. New Zealand with Beth Ross from the Kiwi 8, finished second in Tokyo. Another shout out for them. The Netherlands, I can't see getting on the podium at the Worlds. I know they did at the Europeans, didn't they?
Yeah, and as did no, sorry, it was the Danish, was it not?
The Danish. The Netherlands finished. No, the Netherlands finished third at the Europeans. I think the Danish
just missed out in fourth, right?
No, they were in the. Oh, I don't know. Actually, that's a good shout.
Because there was a real race to the line.
They were
in
fourth,
that
yeah.
Final
they were fourth.
250 behind Great Britain. It was Ireland, and then a sort of blanket Netherlands, Denmark battle going on there. So, yeah, I think the Danish, again, it's always a lead boat for them, but I don't know whether they'll do enough to be able to get onto the podium. And the Italians, have we mentioned the Italians as well?
No,
the likes of like Aisha Rotchek in that boat, and Chiara Ondoli, a couple of strong athletes, kind of linchpinning that Italian crew too.
Yeah, they are linchpins of that crew. So my picks for gold, silver, bronze in that. Apologies to British listeners. Australia, Britain, and Ireland.
I agree. I think it will be Australia, GB, Ireland.
Aha. Let's move on to an interesting one. I think certainly for there's no standout crew in this event as the Dutch dominated the whole event, but there is a Dutch crew in the event that tried to heave everything over at the Europeans and didn't manage it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, this new look Dutch combination in classic Dutch style of put what you thought were sweepers into a sculling boat, and they've thrown out the rule book and put, the likes of Simon van Dorp into that quad, right? Who you'd think of as like big college athlete apes rower is sculling a finely tuned quad, right? He's big and he's powerful. He's got that amazing, sub 530 erg, but not the kind of person you'd expect.
540 erg.
540 erg, sorry. Who has, not the kind of person you'd expect to be in that quad, right?
No. It's interesting. I wonder. I wonder what someone like Diedrich Simon would have made of those guys. I think even he, the Dutch coach who worked with that, one of the coaches that worked with that Netherlands quad in the Olympics, would struggle. You've kind of got to get them to come off the power, and which is their natural resource, isn't it? Be interesting to see what happens with them. Italy, I was really pleased to see them, particularly after what happened to them in Tokyo. Really pleased to see them win the Europeans. I thought they did ever so well to get in front of a really good Polish quad. I'm looking forward to seeing the Chinese out again, because they had a great season, didn't they? Outside of, I think they blow out in Lucerne, but did they win in Belgrade and Poznan? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. And they also had a pretty good Henley Royal as well, didn't
Yeah.
they? So, yeah, I mean, it's one of these events, like you say, there's no like measure crew, like there's no crew to say that's the benchmark, right? Everything that goes on around them, we know that this crew is the consistent performer and we know we can guarantee they'll be on the podium. So how people perform relatively to them is what we'll use to to judge. And there's no crew like that in the men's quads at all, right? There's no Dutch quad of last year to say
No.
they're the standouts, they're going to be on the podium, let's see how everyone else gets close, how close they get to them. So yeah, it's just so hard to call. I think so hard to call.
We haven't mentioned the British, which we should do really, because didn't they catch a crab in the semi-final and then did really well to get back into the race? And then you kind of thought if they move that fast over the second half, they're going to medal at the Europeans, and they didn't quite manage it.
Yeah, and look, they've thrown George Bourne and Matt Hayward into that crew from the double. They'd had 2 weeks of training on the run up to that European champs in that combination. And again, they were within sort of touching distance of the podium. So they could be a real surprise package for this World Championships. I think for me, my top three are going to be the Italians, I think I'm going to go for the Italians, the Polish, and the Dutch, I think.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, definitely. You were the Dutch. I have gone for the Italians, the Polish, and the Chinese.
So very similar.
Yeah, very similar. Yes, and talking about Chinese, let's move on to the women's quads.
And the band is back together in the Chinese women's quad. Zhong, Chen, Qi, and Liu are back. They've played around with this combination all season. They've put people in the singles. They've rotated them round. They've chucked them in sweep boats. But this combination that was the Olympic champion crew from Tokyo 2020 is back to contest the World Championships and to defend their title.
Yeah, they are reigning world champions. The thing was, I looking at when Lola Anderson came back into the British quad in the Europeans, and they were so dominant in that final. I was kind of thinking, where would China be in this? Would they be even more ahead of the field than the British were? And it just stopped, made me think, could the British compete, go head to head with the Chinese? And then you kind of think, no. But then, mate, what do you think?
I think, that British performance at Munich was sensational. And I know we're talking about the Europeans a lot in this call, but I think that it is the most recent amount of information we've got about a large number of crews that are contesting, right? It's a real recency thing. But I think having kind of heard the feedback from what the British crew had to say about that race when they were interviewed afterwards, that was as close to perfect as they've raced. They said it was the best piece of rowing that they've done since they've been together. Something just clicked and they got it right. Now, the challenge is, how can you replicate that, right? It's being able to replicate that again and again and again. And so whether that is going to be the case over again the World Championships is long. I think people forget how much racing you really have to do to get to that final goal of
Yeah.
standing on the podium at the end of the week. So look, I think there'll be a podium boat, no doubt about it. Whether they can overhaul the giants that are the Chinese women's quad, I don't think so. Maybe by next year, with a bit more consistency. But I think for this year, China are just going to be too strong.
Talking about other contenders maybe for medals, the Dutch with Ilse Paulus' sister Benta in the stroke seat, the Polish crew who have got a couple of the women who got a silver in Tokyo that haven't really shone this season. But maybe with time, I know the Swiss think a lot of their boat, the under-23 gold medalists outfit, isn't it?
And I would totally agree, Martin. They've been absolutely done over by COVID, to be perfectly honest, this season. They've had a terrible time with 3/4 of the boat not being able to race at their home World Cup in Lucerne. I think it was only poor old Salome Ulrich that had to push out in a single whilst the rest of her crew recovered from COVID. But based on the fact that they haven't been able to train, their result at Munich was really strong, right? Against a lot of very well drilled, well trained crews that hadn't had those same issues. And I think with a little bit more under their belts, I really back this Swiss crew, right? They delivered at juniors, they've delivered at under 23, and they're only on the up and up. And I think I could genuinely see them going head to head with the likes of like a Poland for the bronze medal.
Yeah, and should give a mention to the Ukraine. If they're going to pick up a medal in an Olympic class event, I think this might be the one. Bit of an outside chance. Let's go for our predictions then.
I'm going to go China, Great Britain, Switzerland.
Well, I like your bronze medal. Predictions. My bronze medal in this goes to the Netherlands. So we've got 2 more events left to have a look at, and the 2 biggies, the 8s. Oh, I should just mention actually, I thought I saw on because there's no German women's quad, is that right? And I think they've been struck down by COVID, and I think that's another reason why there's not a German women's 8 in the program, which is really bad luck for Germany to be affected in that way. But let's take a look at the men's 8. One of the last races on the program. Decent entry as well. Is there about 10 crews or something like that?
Yeah, a really decent entry for an 8s event, and a couple of nice newcomers to the event. Great to see Canada fielding an 8. Great to see Ukraine fielding an 8 for the World Championships. But yeah, I think that looking down the list, and the Czech Republic, must mention that's great to see them fielding an 8 as well. I think I know who my gold medalist pick is, but my podium, I could still be convinced, Crossy.
Well, it's really quite interesting in terms of that Australian performance in Lucerne, where they took a silver medal behind Britain. I am really intrigued by this Netherlands 8 that had this most amazing last 1500, and could they do that without catching a crab and having to restart? And how close would they have been to the British crew? Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say there are so many factors about that Dutch men's 8's performance that blew me away, right? Like the gravity of the crab that was caught, like I was alongside it in the car. And for those of you that didn't watch the European Championships, the Dutch caught a boat stopping crab of all boat stopping crabs, which usually you'd write off a crew like that, right? They were 2 lengths back after 250 meters. You can say see you later, and they rode through the field at absolutely lightning pace to come back and get a silver medal. Now, the other thing that really impressed me is that crew had barely been together, right? All of the other members of that crew had been in other boats this season, whether it was the pair, whether it was the four, whether it was the quad. Like, they've got a whole mix of people that had come together and they went, do you know what, let's give the 8 a go. And so they'd barely, I think they'd been in it for like 3 sessions or something silly, hadn't they?
Yeah.
And then they went and produced a performance like that. There's got to be something about this crew, and you know what, maybe it was a sort of fight or flight adrenaline fueled performance and we could see the wheels fall off at the world champs, but you got to have something pretty special to do what they did in Munich, right?
Yeah. And then the Germans, they are without 2 of the guys that have been in that 8, Roggensock and Follett. I think one of them, maybe it's Lawrence Follett, is doing some studies or training as a policeman. I don't know why Olaf Roggensock's not in the 8, but on the entry I've got, neither of those 2 are in it. I know they've had a decent training camp in Italy, but I think they're going to struggle to get on the podium again. Italy have got some big names in the 8, you know, Castaldo, Di Costanzo, Lordo Vicino.
It's like their
Romania,
rowing celebrity 8, isn't it? The Italian 8.
yeah,
They've
and
got
then
all of their medalists.
You know, at some stage the USA, the sleeping giant, is going to have to come through. They've got Tom Tahart with an 8 that's got a lot of guys, Mike Tatey's guys from California Rowing Club. I think, you know, counting them up, there's 5 guys from California Rowing Club. Just the one Olympian with Liam Corrigan. I mean, it would be great to see the USA on the podium. I think just for world rowing, to get the Americans on a podium I'd certainly be pleased at that.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
who's going to win? Who's going to win the medals? I have gone for Britain, USA, and the Netherlands, which I'm kind of thinking they're a bit random. So I haven't got Germany or Australia on the podium. Sorry to any Australians listening. You
I know.
definitely in with a shout for a medal.
I'll make up for that, Crossy. Okay, I'll put them on my prediction. So I'm going to go Great Britain, Netherlands, Australia.
Netherlands, Australia. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Let's have a look at the women's 8s, which unfortunately, I think, because Britain haven't entered an 8, which is kind of a thing, because, you know, if your big nations aren't entering women's 8s, then that event becomes less viable. And Germany have had what I imagine is a COVID thing, so they haven't got their women's 8 that wouldn't, necessarily wouldn't be challenging for the podium. But we've got 6 crews who are going to race each other again. The Americans coming in, having missed a podium in the Tokyo Olympics, with a crew, all of them based at Princeton.
Yeah, and it's it's going to be a tough ask, I think, for the US, but certainly, a few of these crew members haven't raced internationally in 4, maybe even more years. They've not raced senior or under 23 events for quite some time, so it's going to be quite a sort of baptism of fire coming into a full guns blazing world championships. But like you say, a few notable absences, and actually, again, another event where we've not really had one benchmark or superstar crew to pitch everyone against, right? Like, it's been chopping and changing. There's lots of doubling up. The Dutch are doubling up, which again, I think is another really big thing to note, because you don't see that often at world championships. I know that, there was a bit of a trend set, I guess, in 2019 when the Kiwi and the Aussie and the Canadian women's pairs all did the same thing and they all doubled up. And I think it gave people confidence that you can do that and still win medals. But the Dutch and the Romanians choosing to do that here at this event, whereas everyone else, coming in on fresh legs, the Canadians, the Aussies, and the US, I think, all just gunning this as their, a flagship boat. and it's going to make some interesting racing.
I mean, the step on the Australians made in Lucerne was amazing, really. And I think that's an underperforming crew. You know, I thought they could have done better than their 5th place in Tokyo. Whether they can do that again, I'm not sure. So Canada with 3 rowers from their gold medal in Tokyo, whether they'll have the same spirit that they had then. They've got a different coach. Is an interesting one. So let's go for our predictions on that one.
Oh, can you go first?
I have got Romania winning. Australia, I'm having faith that Tom Westgarth has done the business with them. And then I've got USA in 3rd.
So you're not putting the Dutch on the podium?
No, I'm not.
And you're not putting the Canadians on the podium either?
No, which is a bit of a shout, that one.
I think I'm going to go Romania.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go Romania. I'm just so torn between whether I put the USA on or not, because they're a young crew. Like I said, I really want them to do well, and this could be their like bounce back into this event. But I just think that the Australians and the Canadians are gonna do it. So I'm gonna go for Romania, Canada, Australia.
Canada, Australia. So I did take a note of these predictions. So at some stage we'll have to come and have a look and see how we've done. I think a warning to anyone watching that generally, certainly when I predict, I get loads of things wrong. So don't go on what I would say. One thing we did say we might talk about at the beginning, and we maybe got just a moment to talk about it now, Camilla, is the Queen's funeral is on Monday. I wonder, I think it's a big deal that British crews, certainly, and maybe not just British crews, but other Commonwealth crews will be racing on the day of the funeral. I can't imagine they won't race, but I wonder if there'll be some kind of arrangement, a minute's silence or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's the gravity of the event, right? And this mark in history and time. It's very significant, and I think it would be a bit. I can't imagine it will be overlooked. I think there might be some arrangement that takes place. I certainly would think that the British crews certainly would be sort of pushing for that and asking for that. But like you say, if it will impact a lot of Commonwealth countries as well, of which the Queen was head of state. So look, I think we'll wait for the guidance from World Rowing and from the international rowing body as to how they're going to approach it.
Yeah. I think both of us will wait with interest. I can remember, I think the British 4 was the World Championships was one of the only sporting events that Britain was involved in that went on the weekend of Lady Diana's funeral. And the Telegraph, I think, ran a big photo on the sports page of the British 4 with their heads bowed, with the black ribbons pinned to their vests, which was very effective in terms of sending a message. So maybe there'll be something like that coming out of this World Championships. We will see. Anything else that we need to talk about that we haven't, Camilla?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we did say, at the end, we would definitely kind of talk about the sort of general the para rowing events as well. I think there's some clear favourites in each of those events, but fantastic to see such a huge entry in things like the PR1 men's and women's singles. I think there's going to be hot competition for the placings in all of those events in the start of this new kind of Paralympiad, and yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating World Championships, not only because it's the first one post Olympics, but in this shorter cycle, everything's just gotten that little bit more intense. So it's not like your average post-Olympic worlds, is what I'm going to say.
I think just to shout out, we did consider just doing the non-Olympics and Paralympics events, but we kind of wanted to keep to an hour, so we just thought we'd focus on the Olympic ones for this. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you, Camilla. And I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Let's end the live part of this broadcast now, and it's Crossy's Corner signing off. See you again soon.